Today's story comes from my office friend. My friend shared that during the time when they were repeating middle school due to low grades, some very strange things happened. The school where they repeated was originally an abandoned miners' hospital located in Leadville, Colorado, built on a lonely mountain filled with mines. Places like this never run short of strange stories, but at that time, no one expected that the most frightening story wouldn't be in those dark mines, but right on a bed in their own dormitory. For convenience, let's call my friend Alex. Alex said that in the year they repeated middle school, they went to a school located in Leadville, which was most known for its aluminum mines. The mountains around Leadville were filled with different mines, along with some illegal black mines, but they had all since been abandoned. What's even more special is that this school used to be a miners' hospital, and with such a background combined with the lonely environment, it set the stage for various eerie legends. On the first night Alex started school, more than a dozen girls in the dormitory began to chat about ghost stories to break the ice. The stories were full of unintentional plot holes, and they laughed them off as a joke. No one took it seriously. Just as the noise was slowly fading and the dormitory was about to quiet down, a girl named Brooke, who had just transferred and was still new, suddenly exclaimed, "Did anyone see a person standing in front of Alex?" Alex was shocked for a moment, then looked at that unfamiliar face, feeling confused. They had just met. So who would believe such a silly statement? Therefore, Alex took it as her trying to fit in and didn't answer. Others didn't pay much attention either, but from that day on, Alex noticed that Brooke had developed a strange habit. She always slept with her back to Alex, facing the wall. No matter how much she turned over, Brooke never turned around. And so, almost 2 months passed. One day, it started pouring rain, and the school canceled evening study. Everyone returned to their dormitory early. The dormitory was dim, and raindrops pounded against the windows, creating a mood that felt strangely heavy. At that moment, Brooke suddenly spoke up in an unusually serious tone, saying something chilling. "Actually, I can see ghosts." The other girls in the dorm were stunned by her words. Dozens of eyes turned toward her. Then she paused, her gaze landing on Alex, and continued. "Every night at midnight, there's a person standing at the foot of your bed, watching you sleep. I don't know how she gets in. Every time I open my eyes, she's already there. Since you sleep on the upper bunk, while you're asleep, you're actually facing her." Then she paused again, her voice becoming even lower. "I sleep facing the wall every night, because I don't want to see her anymore. Later, my family found a priest, and now I can finally not see her." At that moment, Alex was frozen on the upper bunk. Brooke's words were like thorny vines wrapping around her chest, making her feel suffocated. A wave of nausea rolled in her stomach, and she couldn't tell if it was fear or disgust. All she wanted to do was block her ears. The dormitory was terrifyingly quiet. The only sound was the raindrops tapping on the tired window surface, creating a dull noise, making everyone's breathing especially clear. Just then, the girl sleeping on the lower bunk beneath Alex suddenly called out Alex's name. Alex's head was in a chaotic mess, filled with the things Brooke had said, all tangled together like a ball of yarn, without the strength to respond. She thought this girl was just startled by Brooke's words, so she replied vaguely without lifting her eyelids. However, just a few seconds later, the girl called out for the second time, her voice tinged with a slight tremor. "Look at me." This jolted Alex back to reality. She took a deep breath, turned to her side, and peered down from the upper bunk. In the dim light, she could see the girl's half head sticking out from under the blanket, her complexion as pale as paper, her lips pressed tightly together, her eyes filled with fear, staring straight at her. Alex asked, hoarsely, her voice somewhat airy, "You were just staring at me. I called you twice, and you didn't respond." Alex felt a thud in her head. "I wasn't." She had been lost in thought the entire time. Then the girl interrupted, shaking her head vigorously, her hands gripping the edges of the blanket tightly, her knuckles turning white. She said, "You were lying on the edge of the bed, your face facing me, completely still, with your eyes wide open. When I called you the first time, you were still looking at me. But when I called you the second time and you responded, that face suddenly disappeared." As she said the last few words, her voice trailed off to almost a whisper. Alex, following her gaze, looked down at her own hands, which had clearly been under the blanket. How could they be at the edge of the bed? Yet the terror on her face was not an act. Those wide eyes mirrored her own pale reflection. The rain outside had strangely quieted down. The wind slipped through the window cracks, producing a moaning sound, as if someone was sighing at the dormitory door. Alex suddenly pulled her head back, lying down flat, her back pressed against the cold bed plank, feeling all the hair on her body stand on end. What she had said about facing each other suddenly painted a clearer image in her mind, and the girl's words felt like an ice pick plunging into her muddled brain. Alex was frozen on the upper bunk, her blood feeling like it had instantly stopped flowing. Even her fingers forgetting how to move. The nausea that had been churning was taken over by a deeper chill, traveling from her lower back all the way to the top of her head. Alex opened her mouth but couldn't make a sound. The face described, lying at the edge of the bed, suddenly vanished, like a close-up shot from a movie flashing repeatedly in front of her. Alex, in fear, suddenly buried her head into the blanket, curling up her knees, her toes pressing tightly against the wall, wishing she could turn into a ball and make the blanket an impenetrable fortress. The rough fabric against her cheek carried a lingering scent of soap that couldn't be washed out. But that trace of warmth couldn't mask the cold seeping from her bones. Out of the corner of her eye, she caught a glimpse of an arm on the lower bunk opposite, propped up on the bed, still facing the wall, the side profile appearing blurry in the dim light. The lips moved slightly, as if trying to say something, perhaps to explain, perhaps to add more details. But in the end, they merely pressed into a line, falling silent. The entire dormitory fell into complete silence. The raindrops continued to tap on the window, but the sound felt as though it had been absorbed by something, becoming distant and muffled. The breath of 16 people mixed together, yet there wasn't the slightest sign of liveliness, only the rise and fall of heavy breaths, like fish trapped in a net. No one spoke, not even the sound of someone turning over. It felt as though everyone, like Alex, had been nailed to their respective beds. Alex was wrapped up in her blanket, still struggling inside. After all, she had only just met this person. How could Brooke have made up such a story for 2 months? From an initially silly line, "There's someone standing in front of you," to her being forced to sleep facing the wall. Not to mention the sudden disappearance of the face on the lower bunk. This string of details was too confusing, too unbelievable to be made up. But what if it were true? This thought sprang up, only to be forcefully pushed down like wild grass. The idea of the person standing at her bed every night, that shadow facing her, seemed to be quietly watching her curl up from under the blanket. Alex sniffed, her voice muffled by the heavy blanket, trembling with fear, repeating over and over, "Let's not talk about this anymore. Just don't talk about it." Alex buried her face deeper into the pillow, covering her ears. The silence outside the blanket became heavy, pressing down on her back, making her feel suffocated. She didn't know if Brooke had heard her or what others were thinking. That night, Alex lay awake until late into the night, finally dozing off in a daze, only to have a very vivid dream. In the dream, she was sitting on a long bench in the dormitory hallway, doing her homework. The hallway lights were off. It was pitch black. Only the light of her desk lamp lit up the paper. Behind her came the faint sound of fabric brushing against each other. Alex turned her neck to look back and saw a girl dressed in white, hanging from the railing where they usually hung clothes. The windows in the hallway were open, and outside was a dark forest, a cool breeze blowing in, swaying her dress as her feet gently rocked back and forth, just a few feet away from her head. Alex was so scared that her whole body stiffened, not daring to make a sound, fixing her gaze on her paper, pretending she saw nothing. But in the moment of closing her eyes to take a deep breath, the view suddenly changed. She became the person hanging from the railing. Looking down, she could see the girl in white sitting on the bench, writing on her test paper. Everything around was still pitch black, Only the light from the desk lamp flickered like it could make one dizzy. The next morning, when the dorm manager called everyone to wake up, Alex nearly jumped out of bed, her heart racing. That day, she felt drained, staring blankly at the blackboard during class, not understanding a word of what the teacher said, her mind busy with the images from her dream. Before long, unable to handle the stress, she requested to change dormitories. Coincidentally, Brooke also switched to the same dormitory as her. The pressure of repeating school was growing, filled with tasks and study points every day. This experience gradually sank deep into her memory. Later on, Alex successfully got into a great high school, thinking that the strange experience had been left behind, until the first day of high school, when Alex saw dorm mate Casey in the new dormitory and froze completely. It turned out to be the girl who had transferred to Alex's previous dormitory after she changed dorms with Brooke. What chilled Alex even more was that she discovered Casey also liked to sleep facing the wall, just like Brooke did back then. Once they got to know each other, during one conversation, Casey learned that Alex had come from that repeating school and had stayed in the dormitory where she once slept. Suddenly, she asked Alex excitedly, "Do you know why I always sleep facing the wall?" Alex's heart dropped, and she didn't dare to answer. Casey continued, "One night during that time, I woke up in a daze, and when I opened my eyes, I saw a pair of eyes staring at me from the bottom of the opposite bed." After a pause, she looked at Alex, speaking carefully. "That bat was the one you originally slept in." But Alex had never told her about the events that had happened in that dormitory. In that moment, she felt frozen in place, her feet nailed to the floor, even forgetting to breathe. The wind in the hallway slipped through the half-open window, gently swaying the corners of the curtains. Sunlight spilled through the glass onto the floor, casting warm spots of light, and even the air was filled with the sun-warmed scent of drying clothes. But that warmth couldn't reach the cold deep in her bones. Her fingers tingled slightly as she stared at Casey's face, which was partially turned away. Her mind felt like it was being pulled in countless directions. Was it luck? Perhaps. After switching dorms, no one mentioned the figure at the foot of the bed again, and she had managed to get through the hardest days of repeating school. Even her nighttime dreams became peaceful, and she never saw that white figure hanging from the drying rack again. It felt like it had truly been left behind on that upper bunk with blue and white checked sheets, not crossing that dormitory door with her. But how unfortunate! Casey's words were like the last piece of a puzzle, the fragments fitting together seamlessly. The tense back of the arm facing the wall, the pale face of the girl on the lower bunk, the suddenly switched views in the dream. And at that moment, the flicker of fear in Casey's eyes when she spoke of the eyes under the bed. These details pierced her heart like needles, forcing her to acknowledge that none of this was a lie or an illusion. It had really existed, and it clung to that bed. Alex instinctively glanced behind her. In the empty hallway, there were only her and Casey's shadows, yet the familiar chill crept up her spine, making her feel cold again. Alex felt a chill at the back of her neck, as if she had returned to that stormy night in the dormitory, where eyes were quietly watching her curl up across the blanket. Alex opened her mouth, wanting to laugh and say, "What a coincidence!" But her throat felt blocked, producing only a dry sound. She couldn't tell if she was lucky or unlucky. After all, since that incident, she had not encountered anything like it again. So what do you think about this? Are there any scary legends circulating in your school? Finally, everyone is welcome to discuss. I am Mab Talk Who Can't Get Better. See you next time. If you have a story, send me.